Hello, welcome back to another video. Well, I'm just in a place called Newton Heath, just off Oldham Road in Manchester, and this I think is the site of a place called Dob Lane Church. I mean, complete undergrowth here at the side of a McDonald's just over here behind me. And here around Dob Lane, apparently deep below me, there is a spring, and it gives rise to one of Manchester's lost and legendary waterways, and that waterway is Shooters Brook. So it might not be the exact spot, but somewhere around here Shooters Brook is born, and it runs down Oldham Road, meanders around the streets at the side of Oldham Road. It runs through Miles Platting around Butler Street, under Great Ancoats Street, and as we've explored in a previous video, down Store Street in Manchester. And it's that journey in the city centre that we're concerned with in this video. Now, Shooters Brook is a tributary of the River Medlock, and obviously it used to run open in the city centre and join the River Medlock. But that now raises questions these days as to where it joins the Medlock. So allow me to explain. Imagine Manchester city centre as it was 200 years ago, maybe even more. It was semi-rural, and there was fields and little rows of cottages, and Shooters Brook ran open, babbling its way towards the River Medlock. And people would walk down its banks, admire the hazelnut trees, and walk past Aurora Place and Fish Pond Street, and walk towards Garrett Hall that stood near where that Shooters Brook entered the River Medlock. Well, the inevitable happened, the Industrial Revolution, and so the onslaught of pandemonium began, and Shooters Brook now finds itself into what was going to become Manchester city centre, and this was going to be industry everywhere. And it was used to power mills, but at the same time it was bridged over, built over, culverted, and over the years it's ended up lost and deep underground. And I don't think anyone's seen it for 150 years plus. It's one of those little brooks, just like the River Tib. But let me introduce you to a second waterway, or a tunnel. And for me to show you this, we need to go back down to Whitworth Street in Manchester. So, just off Whitworth Street, and I'm going to show you the entrance to our second most mysterious waterway. And I've shown it before in my videos, and it's called Duke's Tunnel, and it's old. It's very, very old, and it fascinates me and scares me. And when I do my Medlock journey, I need to walk past it. Will I ever be able to see inside it, and what's it like inside this most ancient of tunnels? And when I say ancient, I'll put the dates down below when it was constructed. I'll show you the entrance now, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Now, for a while the River Medlock was navigable around this area, and boats loaded with coal used to come from the mines at Worsley, sail up the Bridgewater Canal into the River Medlock to here, to the entrance to our Duke's Tunnel. Now, it was constructed between April 1787 and April 1789. That makes it 229 years old. It's 649 yards long. It's 8 foot 6 inches high and 6 feet wide. Of course, not anymore, as I will explain. Now, it goes towards where we know the bottom of Piccadilly Station approach, which was at the time called Bank Top. And a horse-powered winch took the coal up a shaft to Noel and Sons Coal Yard.
Now apparently by 1800 the level of the River Medlock had risen by 8 feet due to silting. Now I've read also that silting was probably people and industry dumping cinders into the Medlock from the fires, coal fires, and it basically just got washed along its length, and the level of the river just basically rose. And that's why you see the tunnel as it is today. Most of it is now covered. Now here's a little bit of extra information I've learned about the entrance to that tunnel. I'm reading this now. The entrance at the River Medlock is heavily skewed. In fact, plans show that the line of the tunnel would have met the river almost at a tangent, but it was given a short kink at the junction to provide the masons with a manageable degree of skew. Well, I'm fascinated with that tunnel and I'm looking forward to walking past it on my River Medlock journey. But looking at it from here, I look at it and I think to myself, what's it like in there? Is it still a complete tunnel? Is it lined with stone when you get inside it? Is there any evidence of the old coal barges that used to go along there to Bank Top? Will I ever find out? I don't know. But what's it got to do with Shooters Brook? Well, apparently, so it's documented by some sources, Shooters Brook doesn't actually run now open into the Medlock. It runs firstly into that tunnel. Or does it? Can we find out? Let's carry on with the story.
So if you'll just allow me to explain at the moment this video. The video is more about the investigations and searching for answers rather than actually finding answers. So at the end of the video, we may be faced with a question mark. We might not get all the answers we require. So please don't expect some great big reveal at the end. It's the story is more about looking for answers to these two wonderful lost waterways. So that said, I'm going to show you a map now.
Okay, so this map shows the area of Manchester city centre that this video is dealing with. You'll see there the purple arrow shows the entrance to Duke's Tunnel, just off the curve there of the River Medlock. And the B6469, that road that you see, that is Whitworth Street if you know Manchester city centre. Looking to the top of the picture, you'll see a green arrow, and later when we start to investigate the route of Shooters Brook, we'll start there at the green arrow where it says car park. We'll go on an underground journey to where it says Sackville Gardens where the yellow arrow is. And then we'll go on a further underground journey back towards the purple arrow where it says Duke's Tunnel. So that is the area, and that's the context of the area that we're looking at. Okay, so this is the underground hidden Manchester map, and you'll see there the River Medlock in grey, and you'll see the arrangement of Duke's Tunnel and Shooters Brook written in green with the red arrows. Now it shows them quite far apart, but a lot of other sources say that they were much closer together than that, and indeed Shooters Brook possibly runs into Duke's Tunnel, as may become apparent later in this story. Now when you click on the links there, because it says read more, it takes you to a little piece of writing, and I shall read that for you. Judging by the narrow width and lack of towpath, the boats used must have been starvationers, the type of compartment boat used inside the Worsley mines. At the coalface, the coal they carried was loaded into wooden containers which fitted in between the exposed ribs inside the boats, hence the name starvationers. The boats were legged through the tunnel and the coal delivered to the end at Bank Top close to the approach to Piccadilly Station. Once at the end of the tunnel near the junction of London Road and Ducey Street, the wooden coal containers were winched up to the surface by a horse gin. The horse-powered hoist for delivery to the adjacent Noel & Sons coal yard.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got two waterways. We've got Shooters Brook and we've got Duke's Tunnel, a very old coal tunnel as we know, right? The hidden Manchester map shows Shooters Brook quite away from Duke's Tunnel, but evidence suggests that Shooters Brook runs very near to, if not into, Duke's Tunnel, okay? Let me quote from you, or let me give you a quote from the Bible, all right? Geoffrey Ashworth's Lost Rivers of Manchester. Now, this book is as elusive as the rivers that it talks about, okay? Very difficult book to get hold of. I was very lucky, right? I say it's the Bible because I've read a report from United Utilities about some of the old rivers and the old brooks, and indeed in that report that was written quite recently, they quote this book. And they use this book as for some of the evidence where these lost waterways run. Let me give you a quote, and you'll have heard this quote before if you watch my videos, but let me give you a quote. The brook and the tunnel were very close together on the ground now covered by Sir Joseph Whitworth's works, now Whitworth Street. There was a weir on the brook about there, and boys when bathing were accustomed to pass by an underwater opening from the brook into the tunnel and bring out coal from a sunken boat at that time lying in the tunnel. Right, so that suggests, I don't know when that quote or where that quote was from, it's just a quote in Geoffrey's book. He's obviously talking about a time when Shooters Brook ran open and kids went paddling and bathing in there. So possibly 200 years ago. They dug through into Duke's Tunnel and nicked coal off a barge, right? Maybe it was earlier than 200 years because I'm thinking if there was a sunken barge in there, the tunnel may have then been disused. Who knows? Right, so we've got the two waterways. We know they're very, very close together. We've got that quote from Geoffrey's book. So now let me tell you about another thing that happened. I know there's a lot of information in this video, but honestly I've had to get my head around it, and putting this video together has been a bit of a complicated thing to do. Anyway, I made a video called River Medlock episode 5, and in that we talked about Shooters Brook in that video. I got a comment from a gentleman named Andy, and he said to me, I've got some information about Shooters Brook. In fact, my company did some work with it. Would you like the information? Of course, steam came out my head and I went, yes, of course I want the information. Now, Andy was from a company called Murphy Surveys. Now, Murphy Surveys are a geospatial specialist consultancy within the architecture and engineering construction industries. And Andy just happens to be the subsurface mapping manager. So he deals with everything, all the surveys that are done underground. Now, a construction company wanted to do some work around the Whitworth Street area of Manchester. Obviously, these foundations for some of these buildings run very, very deep. So they consulted Murphy Surveys, who would carry out an extensive subterranean survey of Shooters Brook, the route of Shooters Brook, the route of Duke's Tunnel, and possibly uncover anything else that may impede any construction work that was going to go ahead. And so the work and the extensive investigations began.
Now imagine trying to map the route of these two very, very old waterways. Some of the records were full of gaps, and indeed some of the records didn't even exist. So they had a massive undertaking on their hands, and Murphy Surveys had to carry out extensive research, which involved going into the libraries, looking through the archives, and going to the university to try and uncover evidence and to try to find out where to search and where to begin the mapping of these two very, very old waterways. They even did CCTV drainage surveys to see where the drains ran and see if they could find access to these old waterways. And the search took them out as far as Mayfield Station, if you know where that is in Manchester. Now, all that extensive research paid off because it led Murphy Surveys to a car park just off London Road.
So the search for Shooters Brook began here, in this rather mundane car park just off London Road near Piccadilly in Manchester city centre. And who'd have thought such an ordinary place would hold such secrets? Now, the search for Duke's Tunnel, or an entrance into Duke's Tunnel, proved to be very, very difficult.
Now, in spite of all this extensive research carried out by Murphy Surveys, trying to find access to Duke's Tunnel was going to be very, very difficult. Indeed, the search led them to the car parks underneath India House. They tried lifting manhole covers to see if one of these manhole covers could possibly lead into the tunnel, but alas, they were unsuccessful. And the search also took them into the undercroft of Piccadilly Station, which is now a car park, and again searching for a possible entrance to Duke's Tunnel. Again, this proved unsuccessful. However, there is a place on London Road that lines up directly with the route of Duke's Tunnel, and I'm going to take you to it now. London Road, Manchester, and I've always thought that this big grid that I'm going to show you in a minute was a clue to Duke's Tunnel. Indeed, the team at Murphy Surveys did as well, but it kind of created more mysteries than it actually solved. So Murphy Surveys were very interested in that circular grid, manhole cover, that sort of domed thing on London Road. It's got some writing around the edge, and the writing suggests that it was a time capsule. So they contacted the university. They knew nothing about it. We don't know nothing about it. Sorry. They contacted the council, Manchester City Council. It would have been the Works Department, wouldn't it? And they said, we don't know nothing about it. We don't know what that is for. They went into the library, Central Library, and again, the search for information proved fruitless. Now, there is some writing along the outside. I'll quote the writing to you. This is your passage through time. Paths and paces, expressionless faces. Framed in time, confused by directions, subject to regulations. Each choose your line. But there's no pressing obligation. Observe your inclination toward whatever destination. Rumour has it that there was a time capsule in it, but this was never found because they lifted the lid to look into it. And when they lifted the top glass lid, underneath was what he described as a plastic tray. And then beneath that, solid. Just solid concrete. So, who knows what that is? It lines up directly above Duke's Tunnel. But unfortunately, it doesn't provide access. So, the mystery of Duke's Tunnel continues. So let's just jump back now to that car park off London Road, and Murphy Surveys are in there lifting manhole covers. Now the information they had must have been very good information, because bingo, they lifted a manhole cover and there it was. There it was, a flow of fresh running water. This was Shooters Brook. So if you've seen me and Connor
doing our urban exploring, perhaps in the Medlock with broomsticks and hats on and bits of torches and testing the depth in our waders, Murphy surveys sort of show you how urban exploring is done by the professionals.
Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of planning that goes into these surveys, and each site is discussed in detail and things are absolutely nailed down so the team know exactly what they're doing and the research is meticulous. Obviously, there's a big concern given to health and safety, and they try to avoid sending a man down into the confined space, into the chamber at all costs. But on this occasion, all the planning was taken into account, health and safety was taken into account, and it was found that they could actually lower a man down into the brook.
So this manhole cover, the plan was to firstly send down what I can only describe as a robot with a camera on the front, and that would follow the route from London Road towards what will be Sackville Gardens. Okay, so we're going further into Manchester now. Okay, so they send the robot down and along it goes to check out what it's like down there. The bigger plan is to send a man down there, and the man that they sent down there was our man Andy. He actually went down there. So I spoke to someone that had actually walked in Shooters Brook, which was, I give him a bit of kudos for that. So don't forget, Andy's showing me all this footage now from the robot. And so nobody else has ever seen this before apart from the people from Murphy Surveys. But we are going to go down there in the car park off London Road, and we're going to go now along Shooters Brook, and I'm going to describe to you what we're seeing. Now, one of the things I need to tell you about it, what we're going to see is a laser picture. I think that's correct, Andy. A laser picture, a laser built up picture of the tunnel.
Right, hold it right there, Martin, because I'm not sure now what I'm talking about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get Andy from Murphy Surveys to come in and voice over the technology that they're using to investigate the tunnel. Now, it does get quite complicated. I'm not going to dumb it down for you because it's a fascinating insight into what Murphy Surveys do in these subterranean surveys.
So the image you can see at the moment is what we refer to as a dense point cloud. The data to formulate that point cloud is captured by a high definition laser scanner. The laser scanner fires out hundreds of thousands of lasers per minute per second, and it's the reflection of an object that those lasers hit that is formulated into the imagery that you see on the screen. Each one of those laser hits can be geo-referenced, so we can give you an accurate position within a couple of millimeters as to where that is underground. There's a lot more work involved in regards to linking the two ends to the satellites in the sky. So with the laser survey, we have to be able to have 2 points of access to get the better accuracy. On the screen, you can see the yellow triangles, or the cheese, as Martin refers to them as. Those yellow triangles are the locations where we set up the tripod and started the lasers firing. In the bottom of the screen, you can see two cylindrical discs. They're actually black and white targets. Due to the cylindrical nature of the tunnel, it's deemed as unfavourable for laser scan surveys. So we have to incorporate foreign objects to break up the lines. So laser scanning works off edges and reference itself back to another known fixed point. Being cylindrical, there is no previous fixed point. So the black and white targets, or the discs that we incorporate into the tunnel, they give that broken line, so they allow us to stitch the images together. So as you can see, some of the triangles are numbered, so we can tell which scan was done where or when, and then once we're back in the office and we're processing through the point cloud and registering the data, we can put them in a sequence. So by putting them in a sequence, it's allowing them to stitch themselves together and formulate the 3D imagery. So the whole process took about 4 hours. So above ground surveys had to be carried out. So we completed full topographical surveys, full ordnance survey control. So every point that was recorded is referenced to a satellite above ground. By referencing it to the satellites above ground or in the sky, it allows us to position it accurately within the city centre of Manchester to plus or minus 10 millimetres.
So we're now going to drop down the manhole cover, and we're going to go into Shooters Brook. Okay, so let me show you this footage.
Okay, so there's the route, car park basement to Sackville Gardens, and it's not entirely straight, as you can see. Let's get into the tunnel. As you can see, this is a concrete shaft from the car park basement, and down we go. Now this is me filming a computer screen, so it might not be perfect, I do apologise. That way goes towards London Road and out of town. You can see the two chaps are in there, and that archway there goes towards Sackville Gardens. That's heading in towards town, okay? So we're now in Shooters Brook, so we need to look along that tunnel and see where it goes. Okay, so we're now just inside that tunnel now, and you'll see at the side there something drains into the brook. Don't know what that is, but these places are full of things like that. Brickline tunnel. Water is about ankle deep. We don't know how old this tunnel is. This tunnel could be anything up to maybe 200 years old. I'm just touching the screen there. Okay, so this is looking backwards now. I'm sorry it gets confusing, but we're looking behind us now, back towards the London Road car park. The tunnel now is 2 meters in height, and it's egg-shaped, okay? Now, the robot will now turn round towards the direction in which we're travelling. Okay, so we're looking backwards. We're coming from the car park on London Road. Now, robot, turn round, okay? And you'll see as it turns round, there's a wall. Now, remember, we're in a tunnel 2 meters high, and there is a wall. All right? As I say, I'm filming the screen, so you'll see my hand coming in. But that wall, or some kind of dam, that was behind that wall was full of water. And we don't know what it is. We don't know what that is or where it goes to. Whether it's some kind of overflow, some kind of holding tank. It was very old because it was stone. I talk as if I'm down there, but I'm getting this off a conversation I had with the people that were down there. But it was a total mystery. Depth behind that wall, depth unknown, full of water, and we don't know its function at all. So there's the first mystery. Now the wall is only about knee high. It was full of clear water, and when Andy looked into it, he said it tapered downwards to a point, but they couldn't see where that point was or where that point went to. Now, whether that is some kind of side tank that something overflows into, or whether it's a overflow for when the brook gets full, we don't know. I know there are some people that watch my videos that have got extensive knowledge about drains. Maybe you could throw some light onto it, but we're not quite sure what this is. Knee height, full of clear water behind it. So, any suggestions? Okay, so now the robot will turn and we'll carry on the journey, and the tunnel now drops down to 800 millimeters, which is under a meter, and they are now crawling towards Sackville Gardens.
So, a short journey overground can be a long journey underground, and I should know.
190 metres in total, from the car park basement to the manhole in Sackville Gardens.
But this is where they came up. From that car park, they followed the tunnel along, and the next manhole along that they could exit from was here in Sackville Gardens in Manchester. And this lowly manhole cover, 9 metres beneath it, is Shooters Brook. So they'd solved part of the mystery, they'd routed it and they'd investigated it. The next step was to see where Shooters Brook went on from there.
So let's just go back. So what of Duke's Tunnel? What became of that mystery? Well, unfortunately, I'm afraid it kind of ends there, apart from this little piece of information I've got for you. Murphy Surveys never did find access to Duke's Tunnel, but they were in contact with another company that had actually looked into Duke's Tunnel. Now, this other company drilled down. I don't know where along the length of Duke's Tunnel they did it, but they drilled down and actually penetrated Duke's Tunnel, and they lowered a camera in. Apparently the conditions were pretty bad, and all they could say was that it was 85 to 90% filled in. With what? We don't know. What it's filled in with, we don't know. But that was the answer, 85 to 90% infilled. Now, whether that's along its total length, I don't know. Whether that camera went in at a point, near a mound, and it just saw the mound and thought it was filled in, we don't know. Maybe there are sections that are still open. Maybe it's all filled in. But there's so many buildings now on top of Duke's Tunnel, it's almost impossible to find an access point and look into it. Andy from Murphy Surveys does actually think he may have an answer, and we think somewhere underneath Piccadilly Station, in the car parks, those car parks underneath Piccadilly, there may be access that leads to Duke's Tunnel. But again, we don't know where. So if you park your car in those car parks underneath Piccadilly, maybe you're parking on top of Duke's Tunnel, who can tell? So unfortunately, as far as Duke's Tunnel is concerned, that's the end of it in this story, we think. Okay, so we stood in the manhole chamber underneath Sackville Gardens. That's where we've come from, and you'll see the camera turns round. There is the road ahead, that tunnel there. That is 600 mil. It's a serious crawl. It's a seriously long tunnel. We need to send an unmanned vehicle.
Other technologies that we used were along the lines of robots or CCTV crawler cameras. They were a great asset for us to carry out the work and complete the task safely. It's an unmanned unit with 4 wheels that just crawls down the tunnel with a camera on the front. And it was initially sent down just to do a condition survey, so looking for any infiltrations or water coming in from the sides, any loose brickwork or any deformation within the culvert itself, just to determine whether or not it was safe for us to enter. We also used it to locate further access points or emergency exit points. During the traverse, we had 2 cameras. One was following us behind and one was in front. So as we got to a point of no return for the camera behind us, the camera in front would be utilised and it would reverse away from us. It provided the relevant task lighting and also helped us with communication with the surface. Being so deep, radio communication didn't work. And once we got about 20-30 metres into the culvert, verbal communication it failed. The rescue teams at Manhole in the car park couldn't hear us, and the rescue teams at Sackville Gardens in front of us couldn't hear us either. So it greatly assisted in the monitoring of what was going on in the tunnel at the time. During the course of the work, regular gas readings were taken to ensure there was no combustible gases down there, and that we could all breathe safely.
Now ideally what we want to do is find where Shooters Brook meets the River Medlock. That would be the ultimate outcome of this investigation. And I'm going to show you now, because the manhole is here just beneath me, and there's the view. That's Whitworth Street, and behind those buildings there is the River Medlock. So Shooters Brook runs on somewhere along here and goes towards the River Medlock, but where does it join? That's what we're trying to find out. And can we send a man? That obviously the guys had come along from the tunnel from the car park to here in Sackville Gardens, but can we now send a man further onwards for further investigations? The answer is no, because the tunnel goes smaller. This tunnel that we're talking about now is only 600 millimeters in height, which is just over half a meter. So it's a serious crouch, and it's a long tunnel. So to investigate this tunnel, we need to send the robot.
Okay, so the robot is now in that tunnel, 600 mil high, and we are 6 meters out from Sackville Gardens. This tunnel is made of vitrified clay. Now that dates it around 20 to 30 years old. Remarkably, no records exist of this tunnel. So this, like I say, this is very much uncharted territory. This would be too much for one individual to crawl down. And you'll see here now 40 metres out from Sackville Gardens. We're going at a downwards angle, and presumably we're heading towards the River Medlock. But now at this point we don't know where we are. 52 metres out from Sackville Gardens. 57 metres. And the tunnel goes on and on. And here, at 60 metres, we open up into a manhole chamber. We're not sure where that is. Like I say, we're now 63 metres from Sackville Gardens. Okay, so the theory is that we think this manhole chamber is blocked at the top. Obviously the robot can't quite see to the very top. Difficult to say where we are, possibly somewhere underneath Whitworth Street, but we actually don't know. And the robot carries on. Okay, so the journey continues from that manhole chamber, and you'll see that the distance clock at the bottom has been reset. We are now measuring distance from the manhole chamber, so you need to add on the 60 metres that were already away from Sackville Gardens. So where it says 36 metres, you'll see it jumping because obviously this is a long length, so we are sort of like skipping through the tunnel. 61 metres from the manhole chamber, and you'll see the water level is beginning to rise. We are heading at a downwards angle. "73 metres from the manhole shaft, and there is something up ahead. There's a large piece of debris in the water, but there is something ahead. I can see that's debris in the water. What is that ahead?" Okay, I'm just going to stop it for a moment. Another waterway is about to bisect our path. Shooters Brook is now going to turn to the right, and something else, some drainage from the left joins it. We are interested in that. What are we looking at there? What is that wall? Okay, so we are now at the limits to how far the robot camera can go. We cannot go any further. If we just turn the camera around, you will note that we are the route ahead to the right. We can't go down there, but we are in a manhole chamber. We don't know where. Add the 80 metres onto the 60 metres already, because remember we restarted at the previous manhole chamber. We're at 140 metres from Sackville Gardens, but we're not sure exactly where we are. Could we be looking at the outside wall of Duke's Tunnel? Because we're near there now, we should be connecting with it at this point. Is that the outside of Duke's Tunnel? Is that the archway? There was a weir on the brook about there, and boys when bathing were accustomed to pass by an underwater opening from the brook into the tunnel and bring out coal from a sunken boat at that time lying in the tunnel.
So there you go, some questions answered, but many more questions raised. Will we find out where Shooters Brook finally meets the River Medlock? Is it in Duke's Tunnel, or is it somewhere further along that we've completely missed? And down below ground, what was that wall that we saw? Was that the outer wall of Duke's Tunnel? And what was the archway that was now bricked up? Is that where the boys ducked through and nicked coal off the barge from while they were bathing in Shooters Brook when it ran open? Is that the place? Don't know. We'll never know. I'd like to think it was, because I think it could well have been, but it was all so long ago, we may never know the answers. Maybe one day on this channel we will find out, but then again maybe we won't. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.